the truth and the beauty, love the mystery, learn your faith, share the joy. Let's talk Catholic. Holy water, the sign of the cross, sanctifying grace, offer it up, 7 sacraments, the blessed Trinity, ponder the mystery, learn your faith, share the joy. Let's talk Catholic. Statues and icons and relics, anointing with holy oil.
Hello and welcome once again to Let's Talk Catholic with Father Scott Lawler. This week we begin a new series about the history of Catholicism here in the United States. Unfortunately, the first few minutes of this recording were lost. However, we bring you Father Scott in the middle of the action.
So growing up, if you're my generation or older, when you're growing up, the IRA were blowing people up in mainland Britain. They carry out terrible atrocities. You might think, where's he going with this? So one of the things where I come from in Glasgow, so Glasgow is predominantly, the Catholics in Glasgow are predominantly from Irish heritage. Nearly all of us are from Irish heritage. And most of our priests were either Irish, as in born there, or of Irish heritage, like me, second generation. And one of the things that my brothers and I were very blessed in was that my parents and my grandparents didn't bring us up to see that there was equivalency between being Catholic and supporting the IRA. But many of our parishes used to have fundraisers for the IRA. And many people thought that in order to be Catholic meant that you had to be a supporter of a terrorist organisation because they were theoretically Catholic. Now, I'm going to tell you now, you don't know this, the IRA is actually a communist organisation because they got power in Northern Ireland and they started removing religion from the schools. So they're evil, right? But we used to have our priests, was not unusual for our Irish priests to talk about the struggles of the IRA and things like that. So there's no equivalency between being Catholic, even if you have Irish heritage, and supporting something like that. So when I came here to live in the States the first time, I came across something that, where I lived in New England, I kept meeting people who claimed they were Irish, even though they were Americans, and therefore thought the IRA was a good organisation, because they didn't know what we're talking about. Now that's obviously a terrible thing, but when I moved here to Michigan, when I came back, I started meeting people who thought that, so this isn't as bad, but it's symbolic of the similar thing I would suggest, thought that being Polish meant that you flew a red and white flag, you ate pierogi and kielbasa. And the being Irish meant that suddenly you defined the time to go to Mass during the week on the 17th of March, and you wore green. And you had corned beef and cabbage. Which if you'd said to my grandmother, let's have corned beef and cabbage, my grandmother would have said to you, why would you eat peasant food? If you are from Polish descent, many of you are from Polish descent, right? The really most important thing in the history of Poland is Catholicism. Not kielbasa, not pierogis, right? Not a red and white flag. Most important thing is it's Catholicism. Many of you are Irish descent. Because if you're Irish descent, that's the same thing. The most important thing is not leprechauns drinking Guinness and playing the shillelagh. or the hurdy-gurdy, whatever it is your Catholicism. Many of you in front of me, whether you know it or not, will have the blood of martyrs in your family lines. You didn't die because they were Polish, or because they were Irish, or because they were French, or because they were Spanish, or to a certain extent, if they were in England. You died for the faith. And one of the things that inspired me to think about this, something I wanted to do for a long time, was I want you all to be able to explain, be clear to it is, and explain to those who you know, whether they be children or whatever, that what they turn their back on when they walk away from the faith is something that your ancestors died for. Because I meet too many people who will shake my hand, hear me speak, and of course they can't tell the difference between the Scottish and Irish accent. And they'll shake my hand and they'll say, "Oh yeah, I'm Irish." And I'm sure that, because I do this sometimes, if I said to them, which parish do you go to? They would think, why are you being asked that? Why are you asking that? But these are fundamental things. My great-grandparents were persecuted by the English for their faith, not because they were Irish. It was for their faith. And it doesn't matter how long any of your ancestors have been in this country. Catholics were persecuted in this country. Terribly. So one of the things I want to come from this is that if you're in a family gathering and someone says to you, well, I'm Polish, as they reach for another kielbasa, that you're able to say, if need be, but you've turned your back on our traditions. You don't respect what we believe, what our forebears believe, because our forebears died for the faith. And it's very important that the things that are precious, that we know what they are, and that we hand them on. You know, I mentioned this at the weekend, what the word tradition means. The word tradition comes from the Latin "sedere," to hand on. We hand on a burning torch. You don't hand on ashes. But we need to know, you need to know where you come from in order to share the truth with people. And that's one of the things I want us to be able to do, and those who are watching us, and those who listen afterwards. One of the things I want people to be able to know is we have a proud heritage of Catholicism in this country. And our ancestors, your ancestors, had to fight for it. It wasn't just a case of they got off the boats and everybody went, "Well, that's great, you're Catholics, welcome on board." That is most certainly not what happened. And all the great things that have been achieved over the next year that we talk about, all the great and fantastic things that have been achieved by Catholics in this country came at a cost. It was never easy. Never easy. Not just because of the state of the world, but because there were many places where they actively had laws against Catholics. So this is about setting you on fire with how proud you should be about our faith and what we have done for this great country. Now, has there been stumbling times when we think that we should be so proud of? Yes, of course that's true. But that, so many of you definitely say this, not homilies, that somebody says to you, "I don't go to Mass because the church is full of hypocrites." Your answer should be, no, we've got plenty of room for more. Of course we should. We're all broken. But those of us who follow Christ, those of us who come to Mass, we're trying to do something about our brokenness. We're not just sitting back and saying, so I'm broken, well, that's just how it is. No, we're trying to do something about it. And that's one of the great gifts of our faith. And in Lewiston, very, very recently, so I could safely say, in our lifetimes, right, the Catholics here stepped up to help the community in a way that nobody would have envisaged. And as I said last debate, that has borne fruit. There are people who have come back to the church or are coming into the church, and it's because in Catholics doing what we do, they saw something that was attractive, and that's what we have to show to the world. You know, the great Fulci, this is an expression many of you will have heard him say. The great Fulci said, there are millions of people in the world who hate us for what they think we believe, but only thousands who have taken the trouble to look into what we believe and don't want anything to do with us. The great English author Chesterton, Keith Chesterton, before he converted, he said in an essay, to engage looking for the truth with an open heart. I now realise the name that I cry a Catholic. That's before he converted. Because he saw the truths, and he saw what it offered the world, and he saw that it was something that helped people blossom as human beings. So that's the thing that inspired me in this. So the eventual thing that kicked us off for him was, on the 4th of July, I was sitting in the rectory, and there was a thing come up, and it was about the fire laws and how the present government is going to put on events over the next year celebrating, leading up to our 250th birthday. Right. Now, as far as I know, none of them have happened yet, but anyway, they said this on the news. And I was sitting there, I was thinking, maybe we could do that. Maybe we should do that. I should think, discuss with people what the great things are that we have done in this to help this country be molded, to help this country trust in God. And so that's what was the genesis behind this. So why didn't I collect your names? Right. Anybody who comes, right, gets their name. And anybody who's watching, if you send a message to the Facebook page before Sunday, right? We will allocate numbers to everybody, and each month you'll get this surprise. For those of you who can't see in the back, why get upside in the front? So it says on it, one nation under God, 250 years of blessings. So I bought some of these on Amazon. I went, okay, I thought, so good. So that you've got a chance for, and if you're not able to come because of something, but you want to put your name in, then just give us your name anyway. So, and then the next session we'll announce who it is, and then we'll give them this as a nice, a great souvenir for us to have. So that's going to happen. That's why I was collecting your names, and probably in the future we'll just have a sheet of paper for people to put their names down. So as well as the classes, so it's going to be at least one class a month. There might be more than one, but it's going to be at least once a month. And they'll be streamed live, providing all the stuff works, and then put out as part of my radio program. But I also probably want to do other additional things on the radio to do with the history of our faith in the country. I've already done. So if you're familiar with my radio program or my podcast, I've already recorded Bishop Barriger's diaries. And I'll go through Barriger's diaries for each month. And I make commentaries on them. So we'll rebroadcast them. There's a speaker who that I want to come. Pastor Chambers to teach it for you, and I've already interviewed him a couple of times on the radio. he actually has done Bishop Barringer's steel shoe box. So he's fascinated. And he actually has in the past gone around and given talks. So we'll hopefully get him to come. Probably the winter, before appropriate to have him come in the winter. So if you want to get the additional stuff that I do, so my radio program is on Catholic radio, relative radio. We think it's 88.5, it's the local one here. Some places in the diocese it's 88.9, I think. And then, of course, as a podcast, it's on all of the different podcast segments called Let's Talk Catholic. Sometimes you have to type in Let's Talk Catholic with Let's Talk All. So how is it going to unfold? Well, we are not, which is why I might do additional non-gathering things. Not very systematically go through the history of the faith. We're going to look at different things that are important, and so some of the big things. So some of it's going to be snapshots, some of it's going to be in-depth things. And why is this the case? Well, first of all, it's time. 250 years in the great scheme of Holy Mother Church is not a long time, but it's a long time to try and cover in 11 hours, or 10 hours actually, probably. So that's why I'm probably going to do other things as well. And some things, rather than just throw out dates. So if you've ever studied, if any of you were at college and you studied history, one of the worst things you have is people just be snipping it, because you're just full of this. And obvious. So, although later today, this, if I've got time, I'm going to throw out dates at you. It's also because of the guests. One of the things that I've often realised is that it's a good thing to have a different voice rather than just my voice, if you can get people. So we're going to endeavour to try and get other people to come. If you know someone who is able to talk about certain things to do with the history of the faith, and you think they would want to come, let us know, we'll reach out to them. If you have a topic that you hear one of us talk about, when we talk about it, and you want to know more about it, you can also let us know, and we'll see what we can do. So, additional radio programs that I plan to do is, I plan to do one on the colonial. So what was it like before 1776? On the genesis of the faith here in the States. And there's 3 different places that faith comes from. There's the Spanish, there's the French, north, and then there's the very small residual that comes from the United Kingdom. So, to get use a French word, the milieu, to get what it was like in the lead up to 1776. I plan to do a different, an additional radio program with that. The things that we've learned so far, it's next month. We're going to have a guest. I'm not here, I'll be you next week. So next month, we'll have a guest. I'll be able to stick it out the next of Columbus, which is probably, not definitely, but probably until we had an American Pope, it's probably the greatest thing that the Catholics of this great nation have given to the world. Now, the next are not in every country. Right, the next are in Poland, the next are in Mexico. I'll talk about that in a second. But the Knights of Columbus are a wonderful organisation. They've got presence in Rome. They have support the Holy See and many things like that in Rome. So, Father McGiffey really founded them. One of the reasons they founded the Knights was so that men could be the priests and leaders in the faith for their families. So if you only heard of the Cursillo movement, the Cursillo movement is present in our diocese. So the Cursillo movement, Cursillo is the Spanish word for short course. The Catholicism movement was founded in the Balearic Islands, so Spanish islands in the Mediterranean. And the idea of it was that men would come on Friday, it was only open to men, the men would come on Friday nights to the church and they would be taught lessons about their faith, and then on Saturdays they would be taught more pleasure, more about the faith, and then they would go home, get their families and bring them to Mass on Sunday. And the idea was that it would empower men to be knowledgeable of the faith and be good leaders and fathers, husbands, etc. in the faith. So that was one of the things that inspired Father McGivney, because what he saw was that Catholics were being maligned, refused jobs. One of the things that, you can find this online if you don't believe me, that there used to be at least 8 states. It was not unusual to see signs or things in newspapers that said, no niggers, no Irish, no pagans. So they were second to being no Catholics. That was not unusual. There were active laws in at least 9 states that Catholics could not hold public office. It was actually against the law. Catholics couldn't have the same opportunities of going to college. Hands up how many of you have been to college? Wonderful, the majority of you, right? Before 1945, that wasn't allowed, unless you went to a Catholic college. A thing called GI Bill was had in October, and went to go through the sad, unpleasant history of anti-Catholicism within this country, because it's something that would be useful for us to know, because it's certainly not going about the roses, and probably you have loved ones who suffer with the hands of this. It's far too much, in my opinion. There's too much talk about certain minorities, and they never talk about what was done to Catholics. And it was interesting, I was meeting with Heather and Marty and Donna to talk about these classes. Before I could say this, Donna said this, and many Americans don't realise this. So the KKK were founded to remove Catholics from the South. Not black people, Catholics. That's how I'm anti-Catholic. Things well in places. It's odd we know these things, because one of the things that we have done for difficulties, we have been able to keep our faith alive. And the Circles is very rigorous, despite the fact that we've been up against it. Because many people seem to think, as I preach now, many people seem to think that as Catholics, we're just this really big organisation and plenty of money, and so we're a fair target. There was a book written by Andy Kistakilly back in the 90s, it was 93. I've got a book somewhere, and it's called The Last Acceptable Prejudice. And it talks in that book about how you can't crack jokes about gay people. You can't crack jokes about Jewish people. You can't crack jokes about black people. You can't crack jokes about women. You know what you can't crack jokes about? Married men who are Catholics, who have children who work. That's like 30 years ago, something that this guy wrote this book. I remember reading it in the 90s, I think it was a lot about exaggeration. But there's a lot of it. Well, truth in that people being attacked and somehow being acceptable. Well, it's not acceptable. It's not any more acceptable to go after that group than there is any other group as well. So, we really do need to invigorate ourselves. So that will be the second talk. That will be in October. Then I'm hoping that I can get someone to either by Zoom or come down from the Bishop Barriga Centre to come and talk to us about Bishop Barriga. If not, I'll look, because a wonderful priest that we've been at our buys this, and he's dead now. When I first came here, he asked me if I would do everything I could in order to spread the word about Bishop Mariger, which is what I did Mariger's Diaries. It's why I used to start all my radio programmes with the prayer of Bishop Mariger's cause, because he said very few other people were talking about Bishop Mariger, and that most people didn't know anything about Bishop Mariger. And Bishop Mariger is a fascinating life. I'll tell you what's very insightful. If you get a chance to listen to the or read the diaries yourself. One of the fascinating things is that there's a priest, he talks about in his diaries, there's a priest called Father Menet, M-E-N-E-T. And he's reminiscent of so many other priests that I've met. The man is a nuisance. He's always moaning and complaining, and the reason why he's up here working is because Detroit got fed up with him and kicked her to the curb. Told him, you know what, you should go up and help Bishop Mariger. And when Bishop Mariger was doing his diaries, every so often, he says, Father Menet is complaining about such and such a thing. In brackets, again. And it's quite entertaining because that's so when Father Frank Partridge, if any of you have wonderful man, the holy man, he said to me about, I had no idea what Bishop Mariger was. And I go, yeah, I had no idea. I know a lot of them now. So we'll have a talk on that. Then another talk that I think we'll have is Our Lady in the Life of Catholic America. It's not an accident that the patroness of our country is Our Lady under the title in my section. Of course, patroness of our diocese is Our Lady with the title Mount Carmel, Our Lady of Mount Carmel. So these are where they have sought the intercession of Our Lady, and Our Lady's been a powerful intercessor. I'll tell you someone who's close to many of our hearts. There's a story that talks about St. Bonaventure's in Detroit, when they ran out of food, and they all went round to Father Solanus and said, "We have no food." And he said, "Don't worry, I know somebody can help." He went in the chapel and prayed the rosary, and 3 trucks turned up. It's a true story. 3 trucks turned up with food for the soup kitchen, and he got back in. After the unloading it happened, he got back in, and they said, "You'll never guess what happened." And he said, "I bet any food was delivered." And they said, "Yes." And he said, "She never lets me down." Another person who is a great story, if any of you have read the story of Mother Angelica, they're actually at the door and they want to take all the radio equipment. And Mother Angelica owes the company have been very understanding, and Mother Angelica owes the company, I can't remember the exact amount, but safe for talking sake, it's $125,000.37. It's important that you remember the 37 cents, right? And they're at the door, and the sister portress is keep opening that. The thing is saying, "Yes, Mother will be with you quite soon." She gathers all the nuns in the convent, and they go to the chapel and they start praying the rosary. And they get a phone call. And there's a man down the corridor on his motor yacht who was about to shoot himself, actually hanging on his hand. And he saw a leaflet that one of his family had left that was about how God answers our questions, and it was written by this crazy old nun called Mother Angelica. She used to do leaflets before she created the radio station. And he picked it up and he started reading it. And then he realised there was a number in the back. And then he was inspired to phone up. So Mother Angelica is in the chapel, the 4 guys knocking on the door, and they're all praying the rosary because they think the radio station's about to go belly up because they've come to take all the equipment. And one of the sisters comes and says, "There's a man on the phone," he says, "urgently, speaks to you, Mother." She's like, "I've got other things in my mind." said, no, it's really, really urgent, he said, really urgent. And so she, being a good woman, a holy woman, she said, well, this God must not, we can do this. Went and took the phone, and the man said to her, is this Mother Angelica? And she said, yes. And he said, I just read one of your leaflets, and I've been inspired, I don't know where from, to write you a check for $137,000.37. And she said, I beg your pardon? And he said, I don't know why I haven't been inspired to do this. And Mother Angelica said to him, I know why. Thank you very much. Can you send it by wire? That's another true story about Our Lady stepping in to these sides. And these are, many people tell me, some of you, they love it when, particularly weekday masses, when I tell stories about saints. Well, because they're our big brothers and sisters in the faith, right? So we should know. First book my parents bought me, the Ladybird Book of Saints for Boys. Second book my parents bought me, the Ladybird Book of Saints for Girls. Because I already had one for boys. And my grandmother used to tell us about saints as well. You know, if you want to be a great basketball player, you need to know who Michael Jordan is. Right? You want to be a saint, which should be applying to all of you. You want to be a saint, you look at people who went before, and what they did, do you should do. Which takes me to the next. We're definitely going to have a talk on the saints, blessed venerables, and servants of God of the United States, and we do have them. So you can get a name we someday who've got the title Saint, Blessed, Venerable, or Servant of God. Well, we get there. You can want it. Name another one.
I could see her. She's from Philadelphia.
Catherine Drexel.
Yeah.
St. Catherine Drexel. Elizabeth Ann Seton. 2 weeks ago we celebrated.
But 2
weeks ago we celebrated Blessed Stanley Wather.
Right.
He was a priest who was assassinated in 1984.
And then the guy in the Korean War.
Yes, which time name starts with it. Okay?
Kepler.
Thank you. Right. So there are quite a few. There's a Catholic event, Saint from Louisiana. No, not Saint. There's a venerable, I think. Yes. So there are plenty for us to go through. There are, of course, people who were born here, who came here, and did amazing things and became saints because of what they did here. So there's John Newman, there's Damien of Molokai, there's Marion Colt of Molokai, there's Isaac Jogues, Jean Brebeuf. There's a lot for us to do to hear about that. We have a couple of saints, one of course were blessed, but one I mentioned who actually walked on our soil. So there's Solanus Casey, but St. Andre de Sette worked in a factory in Detroit. You know that thing, that 6 degrees of separation? You know, they say you never more than six relationships from anybody else in the world. Well, see, one of the things of talking about saints, things like that is because, so, Kathiri Tekamitha lived in Sault-Ste-Marie, right? So, on the border of Michigan, possibly stood in Michigan. So, Solanus Casey, all the way said, Bishop Bannigan. I think Father Marquette is a servant of God. So if he's not the Jesuits, we're working on that, sure. So we have all of them. And that's a really important thing for us to cover. And then another thing that we'll be having a talk on will be, kind of touch upon this with Mother Angelica, but Catholic influence on the media. So there are 5 people that I wrote down here when I was sitting with my notes here. So obviously Mother Angelica was one, DWTN, the largest Catholic radio station the world has ever seen. And now, if you're not proud of that as a Catholic. There's something brought with you. It's absolutely fantastic. What EWTN has done for the world is beyond the scope of us to understand. You know, there used to be a radio station called the Voice of America. Have you ever heard of it? Right. So the BBC are the kind of equivalent of the World Service. And the Voice of America was created to bombard the commies, right? EWTN has done more good in communist and former communist countries than the Voice of America ever did. Because EWTN told people about how they were made in the image of God and how much God loves them. That's a message that people need to want to hear. And there are amazing stories about, with Mother Angelica, there was the other story about when she was looking for the place to put the angels. And they were flying around looking for somewhere, and she saw this valley, and she said, her guardian angel told her that's where the antenna, the broadcasting antenna was to be. And they landed, and the engineer said, this is terrible up here, this is a really bad idea. But the valley is a natural paradox. And the engineers could tell this in case. Jackie never trusts an engineer. Too late. Too late. Okay. But don't say I didn't tell you.
Thanks.
And because of that, the signal got so strong that the American government asked her to turn down. And you know what the name of that valley was? San Miguel. St. Michael. Which of course Mother Angelica really promoted. We promoted this a big trip. There's lots of stories like that. Now another one I wrote out was, of course, one of my heroes, Archbishop Philip Sheen, in his programme Life is Worth Living, and what Archbishop Philip Sheen did. And again, what he did was amazing. His books are still worth reading. If you go on YouTube, you will still find his programmes. They are difficult for some modern people to follow because of the style, but I've got tapes by now. Cassette tapes, you don't know if they are, but cassette tapes. I've used a couple of albums with Philip Sheen. I can encourage you any books if you're interested in Romania. The World's Greatest Gift, written by Philip Sheen. It's absolutely fantastic. His Life of Christ, which is an amalgamation of the Gospels, it's about the traditional things that God past, is a fantastic read as well. If you, so I sent Sir John Hughes, whose feast day was yesterday. I sent the Mass yesterday. If you know a priest who's maybe not really living a priestly life, St. John Hughes wrote a great, fantastic work about how priests should live their lives. If you want to give a priest something to really guide them, either the book by St. John Hughes or A Priest Is Not His Own by Philip Sheen. It is a profound, it's from the treats that he gave to priests, and it is a profound work that every singer should be compulsory for seminarians to read, in my opinion. In it, one of the things that Philip Sheen says, as you all know, I very much promote what we call redemptive suffering, that we offer up that which we have for the sake of other people. The Catholic message, right? And I'm actually had, since I preached on that, what was that, 3 weeks ago? I've had well over a dozen people, and 2 people today, say to me, it's the most profound thing they'd ever heard, they didn't know that, and they're cradle Catholics. So, but Philip Sheen says this about priests. He says, because the whole thing is addressed to priests, because it's from retreats that he gave to priests that are turned into a book. And he says to the priests, when you are holding up the bread that is becoming the Lord, or the chalice, if the people can't see the wounds of Christ in your hands, there's something wrong with how you're living. And I remember the first time I read that, and I thought, I don't want to be a priest. That's scary. But I'm really glad I did. Because in my priestly life, like all of you, I've had things that I either could warn about, or I could offer for the sake of my parishioners. And I was at the doctor last week, and he said to me, gave me some moderately bad news. Well, he thought it was moderately bad news. And he said to me, Father, why are you smiling? And I said, I'm smiling because I'm an idiot. And I hit that was in my head. I said, I'm smiling because God must need me to do this for my children. And if I don't willingly embrace it, then there's something wrong as a priest. That's why people at Fukushima are so important to us, because the message they give us helps us become saints. So that's why we're going to pay forward. I've never given a talk to a Fukushima. I've talked about it a lot. I've never given a talk about Fukushima. So unless somebody else comes forward and says, you know what, you do garbage answer, I want to do it, then I'm looking forward to that. Another person who is a thinker for God now is Father Patrick Peyton. So Father Peyton was the priest that started the Rosary Crusade. He's the one who coined the phrase, if you're too busy to pray, you're too busy. That should never be far from your lips. If you're too busy to pray, you're too busy. He was only coined that. Father Peyton, again, some of the younger people would know what I'm talking about here, but Father Peyton was the one that encouraged people like Ben Crosby and Spencer Tracy and Gregory Peck to make the movies that involved the life of Christ or nuns and priests, because they were all Protestant Catholics. Right? I mean, Gregory Peck was a daily Mass Catholic. By the way, so was up to Tishport. Went to Mass every day. Taught by Jesuits, next week to hold off that, right? But Father Peyton, not so well known outside of California and the whole, and that's why it'd be good for us to do a class on, because say I think he's a servant of God. Now, the other two names that I wrote down, Dorothy Day. Dorothy Day was a Catholic who had a very traumatic relationship. Ended up having an abortion and was going into a cycle of despair until she encountered lay Catholics and how they lived their lives in a fire with Hector. She helped start the Catholic Workers Movement. She stood up people who work in this country. Someone who, if I could talk you into it, going to get deacon warning, talking about amongst others, who is that talking? Flannery O'Connor. He knows more about it than I do. Flannery O'Connor is not easy to beat. That's why if he is willing to, it would be good for Hard Hat to talk about it, because that's his wheelhouse, short stories, etc. But Flannery O'Connor she presents Catholicism in a way that at the time made people go, oh, which maybe not so much now, but it'd be useful to have, hopefully Deacon talk about. And the other person that he knows quite a bit about is Thomas Merton, another convert, who is world famous, who forget the muck, who amongst, I think he wrote 17 books. Best known would be the Seven Stone Mountain, I think. He went to the monastery of Gethsemane, where you've been, so yeah. So that's some of the ideas that I have going forward. So last 10 minutes, I want to give you some dates, kind of leading up to 1376. So what happened in 1492? And what was the name of the ships?
Nina the Pinta. Nina the Pinta.
Santa Maria. And when they got becalmed in the Sargasso Sea, which is in the southern Atlantic, what did they do?
Like fishing.
No, they did not. The men all had to go, all the sailors went to confession, and then 3 times a day they sang the Salve Regina, Hail Holy Queen. And after the 3rd day, the wind got up and sailed up to what they called Hispaniola. And what was the first thing that they did when they hit what was going to be called the American soil? They built an altar, and one of the Franciscans celebrated Mass. What was the first thing they did? They had their priorities right. Then in 1571, Father Juan Segura and his companions. So there was a Catholic mission started in what's that called? St. Augustine in Florida. That was a Catholic mission. And they decided they were going to move up the East Coast. And they got up to what we nowadays call the Carolinas, and they were all martyred. It's the first martyrs that we know of. So that's here in sort of 1571. Then in 1597, there was a group of Franciscan martyrs in Georgia, Presbytery, Georgia, and they had been quite successful, so they thought, in converting the local Indians. Until the local Indians decided that, despite what the Franciscans said, that if you didn't like the life, you get dumped up. Because that's what the tradition was, right? And so when the Franciscans said, no, that's not to happen, guess what they did? They killed them all. They killed all the Franciscans. There was 8 of them. So they were all martyred as well. And then in 1644, Catholics arrived in Maryland. Now, there are 2 versions of why Maryland is called Maryland. Right? One is named after Queen Mary. The other one is named after Our Lady because it was Catholics that came. So you could pick whichever one, because it could have been both. You know, it could have been that decided they would call it Maryland, and they would say it was because of Queen Mary, but it was actually because of Our Lady. Then in 1646, you have St. Isaac Jogues, Jogues de Roof, and what are called Black Robes, who are in what is Canada, who were martyred by the Iroquois. Interesting thing about St. Isaac Jogues. So St. Isaac Jogues, when he was captured, the Iroquois didn't kill him the first time they captured him. What they did was, they chewed off these 4 fingers so they couldn't celebrate Mass. So you all see me celebrate Mass. I do that with my fingers because that was always the way the Mass was done. Chewed off his fingers and went back to France. His health was broken, and he begged his Jesuit superiors to go back. And he got a special permission from Rome to celebrate Mass using these 6 fingers. When he got back, that's when they eventually did kill him. In 1673, Father Marquette was a French Jesuit with a companion called Pierre Jolet, I think it was. They travelled up the Mississippi and brought the faith to Great Lakes area, which of course is why up north we have Marquette. And over near Manistee there's the Marquette Highway, because that's the coast that they were on. Then in 1676, a young Indian called Kateri Tekakwitha converted and had to leave her people because they wanted to kill her. In the meantime, over on the west coast, in 1769, there was a relatively old for the time Spanish Franciscan called Junipero Serra, who founded his first mission. And if you wondered about how successful the faith was in the west coast, you'll probably be helping here. So there's San Diego, St. David, San Francisco, St. Francis, Santa Clara, St. Clair, San Pedro, St. Peter, Santa Fe, Holy Faith, Santa Ana. Yeah. Am I missing any of them? I probably am missing some of them. But they're all founded by Franciscans as missions, and many of the missions still stand. There was a very famous mission that was more famous for something else other than a mission. It's in Texas. It's called the Alamo. This is a mission that was founded by the Franciscans. I can't remember what the Alamo's proper name was, or which said it was. But anyway, then in 1776, Charles Carroll signed the Declaration of Independence. He's the only Catholic. He was extremely wealthy, and the Carrolls were a very, very powerful, the only really powerful Catholic family in what became the United States. And he signed the Declaration of Independence. The Bill of Rights, things like that. There was a couple of Catholics more signed in. One of them was, I think, David Carroll, who was his younger brother. But his other brother is very well known. His name was John Carroll, because he was the first bishop here in the first native-born bishop here in the States. And that was in 1789. Then in 1793, Father Stephen Baudin, who was the first priest, he was born in France, but he was the first priest to be ordained on these fine shores. And one last thing before I close with prayer, because I thought this was fascinating, where they put it. First black bishop in America was consecrated a bishop in 1875. His name was John Augustine Healy. He was mixed race, right? Because his father was Irish, and his father married one of his slaves, right? Well, and when you see either of these, this man's children, girls, right? So they'll all be really Irish names, right? I felt as if we should do this in an Irish accent, right? Patrick Francis Healy, right? The first African American Jesuit, president of Georgetown University. Alexander Sherwood Healy, a priest and rector of the Cathedral of the Holy Cross in Austin. Michael Augustine Healy, a captain in the US Revenue Cutter Service and the first African American to command the ship of the US government. Amanda Josephine Healy, a member of the Religious Hospitals of St. Joseph. Eliza Dunmore Healy, a member of the Congregation of Notre Dame of Montreal, the first African American Paris. And then Eugene Healy, the first African American bishop. The next one didn't appear until the 1950s, I think. Now, like any mixed race people, he could pass, apparently, although he was dark skinned, he could pass as a white person, which probably made the boy acceptable. And I was reading that, because there's stuff and I was reading that and I thought, that is absolutely fascinating. So, there we are. That, I'm almost there. So, any questions? I look really excited about coming to do it. One of the reasons, I never said this, but one of the reasons for not doing it consecutively is that means all the sessions are standalone sessions, which means because when I did, it's been broadcast just now, when I did St. Paul in the past, I've talked closer to the Catechism, I've talked closer to church history. When people miss sessions, they feel, was the point coming back? But at least with this, since they're going to be standalone sessions, you won't have to have had to have been at the previous one in order to get something out of coming to see and hear. Okay? Yes? Is that a yes? That's a yes? No? Yeah? Very good. Okay. Okay. So, let's end in prayer. The Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. The Lord be with you.
and with your spirit.
May Almighty God bless you and your families. The Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Thanks everyone for coming.
Learn your faith, share the joy. Let's talk Catholic. Holy water, the sign of the cross, sanctifying grace. Offer it up, 7 sacraments, the Blessed Trinity. Ponder the mystery. Learn your faith, share the joy. Let's talk Catholic. Statues and icons and relics, anointing with holy oil. We call out response.
Thanks for joining us today. You can listen again to this or any other episode of Let's Talk Catholic at our blog, letstalkcatholicpodcast.blogspot.com, or you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, or almost any other podcast provider. You can also like us on Facebook. Let's Talk Catholic is produced by Nick Medelsky and can be heard right here on Relevant Radio in Northern Michigan, Saturdays at noon.
Medals and scapulars, Latin vernacular, teachers primacy. Learn the mystery, learn your faith, share the joy. Let's talk Catholic. CSA, CCD, RCIA, tradition with the capital T. Vestments of red, we pray for the dead in purgatory. Believe the mystery. Learn your faith, share the joy. Let's talk Catholic. Bless us, O Lord, in these thy gifts, the liturgy of the hours, ashes and stations and veneration, infallibility. Embrace the mystery and learn your faith, share the joy. Let's talk Catholic. At Mass we adore the real presence, we genuflect and bow. Advent and Lent, the counsel of truth, salvation history. Learn the mystery and learn your faith, share the joy. Let's talk Catholic. Apostles and martyrs, communion of saints, mortal and venial sin. Holy hours and holy days, human dignity, love and mystery. Learn your faith, share the joy. Let's talk Catholic. Fatima to Guadalupe, the sanctity of life. St. Paul and St. Linus and Thomas Aquinas, on you stay. The Paschal mystery, love your faith, share the joy. Let's talk Catholic.
Excellent.